Very much, Valerio. Thank you all for coming. Really moved by you waking up so early after the dinner. I definitely need to know who scheduled my keynote after the dinner. So yes, today we're going to talk a bit about that, about community, the state of the Python today, and some of the thoughts for the future. So before starting, I really want to talk more about you and get to know more about you and know how many of you have been using Python before, actually are new to the language. I've been using it for less than 6 months. Okay? 1 year. Less than 5 years. Great. And how many of you use Python for data science? Wow, half of the room. And for web development? About the same. How many of you use for both things? Okay. Let's see. Infrastructure, DevOps. Great. So how many of you love Python? How many of you hate Python? How many of you love and hate? Okay. How many of you are from Italy? Wow. How many of you are from Europe? Actually, the ones from Italy. Sorry. How many of you are from Europe but not from Italy? Sweet. And from outside of Europe? Wow. Thank you for coming. It's really a long travel, but you chose the best conference to be. So, before I start, I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about what led to this talk. When the organization reached out and we talked about eventually coming and talk, I was really excited. And first PyCon after a few years, this community is really strong, and I was like, what should I talk about? And most of anything, I think keynotes are special talks. I think hopefully they not only talk about technology, but they guide you through an experience. In my mind, they are supposed to inspire. They are supposed to make you laugh. They are supposed to maybe make you sad or think about things. And I can definitely make you cry, so that's not a problem. My jokes usually suck, so it'll be hard. So every time I do a joke that seems like it's a joke, but you really don't understand, laugh, please. And it'll be hard to inspire, but we'll try. More about me. I'm a software architect at Anaconda, creator of PyScript. Been in the community for a long time. For that, I've been a PSF fellow for some time. I've been chairman of EuroPython, co-founder of the Python Association, Python Italia Association, and helped organize some of the initial series of this conference. And I'm the typical story that you hear sometimes. Came for the language, stay for the community. And especially in Italy, the community is really strong, really amazing. There's a lot of engagement. But in general, that's been the case for everywhere I go. And before we get to the talk, I really wanted to talk a little about PyCon Italy, because it's really, really, really close to my heart. Because of not only historical factors, like being in the organization and everything, but really for the amount of care and the amount of energy that every single organizer put in trying to please all the guests and help them have the best experience ever. So this is a picture we took the first year. I'm pretty sure it's the first year. Antonio doesn't think that is true, but I think it is. And I double-checked with a few others. So hopefully it is. And you can see the founding fathers, the elders who started the association. And I still keep my second shirt. This is not my first shirt. Despite my wife keep telling me, throw this thing away. You never use it. It seems like a bag. But still, I will keep it forever. It's really close to my heart. But I want to also say that community is really hard. You know, you try hard to make things work. They're all unexpected things. Things will go wrong. You don't want to upset people. And every year, people go with the expectation the next year is going to be better. So it's really hard to keep the pace with things. And I want to talk about 2 minutes about the first PyCon. It was 2007. We didn't know what we were doing. There were not so many attendees as today, but more than we expected. And you know, first year, first experience, we didn't know how to run things, etc. And really soon, we realized, but budget is tight, you know, and how are you going to pay for things? And you just hope things are going to go for the better. And this is a picture of me asking Raymond in his honeymoon, can you go home by bus? Because we don't have budget for you to travel. Jokes aside, well, we did pay for his travel. And it was also not the first year, but anyway. This is our accountant, or not our treasurer, before the first conference. And you can see how things can go wrong. This is him looking at the numbers after the conference. And first year, we actually ended up negative, and we used the money that we put as guarantee for the association to keep the things running. So every single member of the organization who had donated to create the foundation helped keep it alive. We could have finished the first year if we didn't commit it ourselves. This is him trying to leave the country. Didn't work. We kept him. So please stand up and thank the organizers. Thank you so much. Because of your work, we're here today, and it wouldn't be possible. So now let's get to the talk a little more. I want to start talking about Python and how, in my brain, it kind of fits a trilogy sort of series, right? Trilogies are super popular, so let's go with it. In my mind, the first era or first movie of Python, it was pretty much led by geeks, by people, very, very, very talented people. Raymond talked the other day about some of anecdotes of the early days, how those group of people, this group of people were leading the language, deciding what's best, born from an idea that is around accessibility and helping people learn programming, but at the same time providing a language that is so powerful that could scratch their itch around, you know, other languages not being that great in some other aspects, you know. But, you know, migrating people from C, C++, Perl, Pascal, etc., that were frustrated about things, and product management Wasn't even a kind of a word at the time. Product manager was driven by geeks trying to implement cool things. And that took place all the 90s, early 2000s, even today. And then a group of people, like let's call the specialists, that were on their own, trying to solve their own problems, not around Python, but around their own stack or their own vertical or specific things. Web developers or data scientists, biologists, physicists, etc., started to approach the language and say, like instead of writing C things, Python makes it really easy to write C extensions and back and forth, etc. So I would start using Python. So early 2000s, some started late 90s, some early 2000s, etc. A lot of specific communities started growing. And late 90s was when NumArray and numeric were created, NumPy as well to consolidate those things. In my mind, when Guido moved to Google and people started thinking that this Python thing is actually a serious thing, and big companies started to use it, and it was easier for every Pythonista to start proposing in their company, we should start looking at this language. And that led to a lot of the things that we use today. But people didn't come for the language. They came for solving their problems with Python. Today, I think we're in a next phase. We are in a phase where people come from, I just want to do my thing. I don't really care about programming. I don't really care about Python. I just want to go to Reddit and copy and paste market trading code that should work. Then I can be rich, or I can be broken in a month, or whatever. Hopefully be rich, right? Or I want to publish a small page, or I sell flowers, and I ask my wife or husband, or girlfriend, partner, can you hack something for me? I want to sell my flowers. They really care less about the language, but getting their problem solved. And there's no really even a concept of product management in that case. And we are all together, the Python community today. And we might like it or not, or people that have been using Python for a long time, that feel committed to the language, or people that feel committed to their own community, need to realize that Python is very diverse in terms of community, etc. And I think as a community, we need to look at the past and the present to understand where the future is leading us. As I said, we are all the Python community today. We all make a Python community. And as usual with Python, we can talk and we can agree on things. Like we can agree on types in Python. That is supposed to be a joke, by the way. I will not speak about types and about if they are useful or not, if they speed your code or not, but use types. We can talk about editors, like the superiority of Vim, Emacs, etc. No, we cannot agree on those two. That's why I'm not using editor. Well, I actually will show stuff in one editor, but it's fine. The reality is that Python is super diverse today. And it's really, really hard to make everyone happy. Raymond was talking yesterday, or the day before, about how in the beginnings of Python, core devs had to agree on a proposal for regex and pattern matching. And it took months and months and months and months, and they finally came up with a proposal. Guido told them, if you can agree on a proposal, I will approve it. And they discussed for months and months and months. And they actually, for the first time in the history of Python, they agreed on something. And then Guido decided to do it differently. So we can agree on things, but we need to understand that the community today is not the same, is not always looking at the language or the problems at the same way. But it's important that we as a community onboard everyone with their diversity and their different mindset and everything. If we think about it, how many of those three groups of people are represented in the community itself? How many of them are PSF members? How many of them are in the PSF board? How many of them are core devs? How many of them can influence how the language is going to evolve in the next 5 years? My gut feeling is that not a whole lot of the recent new generation of Python. And the reasons are very simple. Like, it's very practical. It is really hard to contribute to core Python. Oftentimes you need to learn C. Oftentimes it is a very uphill battle to convince people about your idea. Python is very mainstream. It's very stable. So if we want to make changes to the language, not everyone will agree on things. But diversity is a great opportunity, and I want to make sure that we all understand that. We as technical people, as engineers, we are biased by design. We look at things and we have the history of years and years and years programming. It's natural for us that you open your editor, you start coding, and you run things on your computer. For someone onboarding on a programming language, the association from editor to running something in my computer and then showing on the browser, it's very complicated. It's really hard to onboard on the metaphor. As developers, we don't think much about documentation. We don't really like to talk about documentation. Onboarding new generation of Pythonists that onto your documentation is a great opportunity to onboard people to your project or to give feedback. How can my documentation be easier? They can write tests. There are a lot of ways for us to welcome the new community. There's a lot of ways that we can be a united and strong community together by onboarding new people to the language. And the language itself over the last years, I think, talking more technically, have been evolving towards optimization, oftentimes identified as speed, and accessibility. A lot of libraries, they tend to become a little harder, a little narrower, but getting a lot of more speed. I think that's even more true for the scientific stack, like things like PyTorch or TensorFlow and things like this can be very hard to set up. And the projects, or Jupyter, etc., projects have a choice. It can be easier for your users to use and to onboard, or you can thrive for speed and make things even faster, etc., but at a cost, usually. But let's think about Python and why people use Python in the first place, right? It's cool. Obviously, it's expressive. It's a language born about learning and learning to program. Oftentimes, you think about a problem, a pseudocode, and you think Python at equally. And it has a cool mantra. If you start to import this, it tells you, the principles or the guiding principles around Python and its philosophy. I don't think I ever seen a language that does that or has that in the language itself. And if you can't read, you should run on your interpreter. And people come with cool ideas and jokes, and we integrate into the language. Who here doesn't know about this this picture? Or okay, so this is actually a thing that we integrated in the language because it was a cool joke. So if you import the module anti-gravity, it will actually have a picture. But this is a slightly different version. This is a cooler version. And this is the type of thing that we need in the language. We need cool things. We need to keep Python a language that people like to use, a language that is cool, and a language that is fun, in my opinion. So keeping on the thread of why Python in first place. It's designed for readability. It usually fits in your head, right? If you've ever been in web development, if you try different frameworks and you try different things, there's a lot of hype. Every 2 weeks, there's a new web framework that does different things. And usually, because the web is complex, and a lot of things don't really fit in your head. Python is really easy to learn. In a few days, you can get rolling. It has a really rich ecosystem, a library ecosystem. Batteries included. We actually, over beers, we could talk about this topic more. Not entirely sure if it's really, really batteries included today anymore. But anyway. It does many things and requires not that much of effort. It's super popular. Communities are very, very welcoming and pleasant to interact with. It's usually fast enough, and that's been a discussion for a long time. And if you say otherwise, I disagree. It's fast enough for most cases. So, given all those things, how can we predict the future? So the future, one thing usually, when a company, us as humans, usually when we have needs, we try to pursue our needs. So it's very intuitive that Python will probably evolve towards filling its needs. And on the optimization side of things, we can see a proof of that. Like we have dozens of projects trying to make Python faster, or who tried to make Python faster. And this is just the list of really different implementations of Python. But if you think about just projects around JIT compiling or specific vertical optimizations and things like that, the number is way, way bigger. And when it comes to make Python more accessible, one of the biggest shortcomings with Python is that it's the first language in terms of adoption. It's most popular, etc. But it really doesn't have a lot of story around how you make native apps with Python, or mobile apps, or a full stack web development where you don't need to use JavaScript, or sharing applications and things like this. Russell McGee gave a keynote a couple of years, 2-3 years ago, at PyCon, highlighting that. It's so weird that in Python, you cannot just install Python, hop in, and build a UI. Or once you build it, how do you share with your users? You expect them to have Python on their laptop. Think about it. It's really, really weird. And some projects actually try to work around that. I'm not even, the list could go like tens and tens of projects trying to also share, create a bundle out of your application. Those are just projects that are try to have Python on different platforms, or create UI with create UI applications that run on mobile or different platforms with Python, etc., etc. In my opinion, the efforts around optimizing Python they're going to keep going. If you tell someone a lot of people in the Python community that you cannot do something, they will say, no way, we can do this. So the smart kids, they're going to do it somehow. But I think one of the things that the community should be thinking on and thinking about, and I think is going to evolve, is actually making Python really, really accessible for everyone. That's actually what I hope for. I would love for Python to be ubiquitous. And that's why we created PyScript. So, how many of you heard of PyScript before? Wow, that's really cool. How many of you watched the announcement talk from Peter Wang at PyCon US? Great. Hopefully, so when I started thinking about this keynote, I started doing this way before PyCon, and I couldn't say the project I was working on, et cetera, et cetera. But at some point we said, okay, Peter's talking at PyCon, we have a deadline. So we rushed to get it done. And then Peter, Anaconda CEO, Peter Wang, delivers a really cool talk where he live demo, pulls up his Vim editor, and started coding live and things like this. And I was like, damn it, it's really hard. The bar is really hard. How can I get a better talk? So hopefully you will get a better vision, view into what PyScript is, and a better keynote, or a cooler keynote. So what PyScript is? PyScript is a framework for creating rich applications in the browser. It interleaves with HTML tags, so you can add your Python code with HTML tags. It provides you full access to the DOM and your web page, etc. You can call and be called from JavaScript. So you can write Python and then import JavaScript things, and hopefully you can also do the vice versa. You can write your code and your application logic in one language, and everything lives together happily in the browser. That's not entirely sure, and it's not always happy, but there is no web server needed. And one of the biggest problems we have today around many of the stacks is that it's so complex, oftentimes for no reason, and we'll talk more about that. So if you want to know more about the project, go to PyScript.net. There's some information there. You can start using it, but don't do it yet. Let me talk a little bit about the project. This is the history of the project. And you can see like very shy, growing until May 1st. And what happened May 1st? Well, the keynote happened, yes. And we were not prepared for the success of the project. We are not expecting that much. We're expecting interest or anything. And to be honest, this is kind of a crazy idea. We are trying to run things against the rules a little. And more than anything, in our hearts, Peter and I, we wanted to shake the status quo a little and to challenge people to think things a little differently. The first week of the project being announced, it was trending as first training project on GitHub as well. In a month, it has 12,000 GitHub stars. It has 11,000 followers on Twitter, etc. And it's honestly mind-blowing, humbling. It's really a cool thing. But more than anything, it led to one of my biggest career achievements of all time. My daughter said I was training on TikTok. And why is that important? Well, of course it's important to me, right? But one of the things that we really care about the project is the social aspect of this, and what can it lead towards. And well, it's my daughter, of course, she's biased, but getting young kids excited about something, about technology, about, you know, how cool is this? And, you know, turning social media, even if just localized to my own experience, to our family, into a positive things, despite being social media having 100,000 problems, is a really cool thing. And is an inspiring thing. So, getting back to the more technical side of it, how does it work? And what makes it different from other efforts before, right? Well, first, it's actual Python. It's C Python compiled to WASM. And that's very different from a lot of projects before. It includes core SciPy stack, thanks to the amazing work that folks from the PyDide project have been doing. And same for mscripting, WebAssembly, and a lot of communities that are not really related to Python. It has an opinionated client-side web framework. So we intentionally highlight the word opinionated. We will be opinionated towards accessibility, and we will choose accessibility and easy of use and experience over purity and over doing the things the right way for the sake of the users, at the expense of the users, sorry. So I already said it has full access to the DOM. That's not really entirely true for a lot of projects done before on the browser. It has a straight forward FFI between Python and JavaScript. You can use things for both sides and interrupt between them. Python can wrap JavaScript just as well as it wraps C, Fortran, etc. Normally. Actually, I would claim it way easier. And it's truly serverless. You don't need any server. So the stack, how it looks like. So it has a higher level PyScript slice where we add components to the lower level and try to make a clean API for users to use the lower stack. We try to make it easier. And we try to give the users immediate access, easy access, etc. Also giving options if you want to do the right thing. A lot of the interesting ideas are around onboarding, etc. So, and then we have CPython, etc., provided by PyDide, and WebAssembly on the bottom. So how does it really look like? To write the minimal Hello World application, all you need to do is this. And we demoed live during the keynote. I highly recommend checking that out. A simple script with a little more things. You add PyScript assets in the head of your page. You add your div, etc. And you can paste Python code in between the PyScript tag. We also provide another component that is not the PyScript tag, that is the PyRepl tag that generates an UI where you can type, pretty much like similar to the Jupyter experience where you type stuff and you have a state, etc., etc. You can actually, the REPL can be flexible, and you can say, you know, the outputs of this REPL, direct them to this div, or the errors direct them to that div, etc., etc., etc. So thinking about the traditional apps, usually you have a web server. At the beginning, it was a little more, a little less complex. You have your web server serving your assets, etc., etc. They go through the web, the internet. Your web browser gets resources and render them on the page. Web 2.0, we added a lot of complexity. We had a lot of things to make apps interactive, calls happening between your one app web page, application to the server, etc., etc. There's a lot of complexity, and when things go offline, it's really hard to maintain your application running. True serverless really means you load everything in your web browser, and then you don't need to go back. So what PyScript is not a serverless Jupyter. It's not just, let's put all the data science stack on the browser and that's it. It's not just a Python replacement for JavaScript. It's not just about the web, even if it's starting from there. I repeat, it's not a replacement for JavaScript. There were tons of videos on the internet, oh, is JavaScript bad or things like this. No way. In far many ways, there are reasons for you to use JavaScript instead of PyScript in many cases. And if you care about loading speed and things like this, you definitely should be using PyScript. I want to highlight this. It's not competitive to the ecosystem. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to, challenge projects, etc. If there are cool projects that are cool things, we should wrap them or help them and contribute back, etc. We reinvent the wheel too often. So, demo time. So, how do you generate an error? You just put a typo in there. But how you run code, you just paste your code in a REPL and it goes. In this case, it's using matplotlib to get the results from a NumPy series of NumPy operations, and it displays it to the page. Or you can do cool things like, I don't know, for instance, returning a string that is a div on the page, and it will render to your div, and you can do some weird.
I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream. Well, no, that's bad. I scream,
and it just works.
You scream, we all scream for ice cream.
It's a cooler video than the one at PyCon, and it's for the Italian community. Now I will show you a few more complex examples. So real quick, this is the website, PyScript.net. If you go there, you should have all assets. And you can also find the examples. This is how the example page look. So you can go there and click on the examples, etc. Let me show real quick. This is an example showing a plotting application using Altair. If you're in the scientific stack, it's pretty cool. Same thing for Folium, which is another application, another visualization library. We have examples using Bokeh and other things. One of the things that Python developers have been dreaming for a long time. Oh, I wish I could use D3. D3 is amazing and it's only available for JavaScript. Well, now you can use it. We have an example that shows how it displays with JavaScript and with Python. They're both displaying the same thing. In terms of performance, they're pretty close. You can render 3D things on the browser using GPU acceleration. That is pretty cool. You can render complex applications that are doing more than just plotting things statically. This is a panel app using panel and bokeh with a data set that actually runs the k-means model. And you can interact with it, you can change values, etc. The plots are changing without having a server side backing it up. Same for a panel app that streams data into a plot and changes the values in real time. This is another cool demo using DACGL and panel and bokeh, etc., where it goes through the New York taxi data and you can interact with the data in real time. You can map things to click events, etc. In this case, if I click on each dot, you can see this is showing the taxi data in New York over the day and the number of tips and by the hour. If I change, you can see how people are paying and tipping in different times. And I actually, if I add things in the page, I can interact with the application from my REPL. So if I do app.elevation equals stan, thank you. Wow, that's a big typo. There you go. How many here heard of Beware? Cool. We also have an example translating using Beware. Beware lets you write Python applications and package them for iOS, Android, Mac, Windows. And now we have a backend for PyScript. So this is, forget about this verbosity here, but this application was written in Beware and rendered for PyScript. So here it's very simple. I can just put the temperature here, and it will say the same value in Celsius. The cool thing about this is that this like having PyScript interact with those type of tools and vice versa unlocks a lot of possibilities for the future. We could eventually have native apps using those two technologies and make them interact well together. Another application, this is a PyScript application written in PyScript with a few an extension where we added a component that doesn't exist, like a list. So I can type things here, and I don't know, butter, meat, and I add my elements to the page. There's a Python list that is mapped to HTML DOM elements. I can access that too. That list, the ID of the div that hosts it is my list. So it automatically maps to variables in the Python scope, and I can access it. I can actually see the data. Oh, my liter. Well, my list. And I can actually do cool things. This is very broken, very experimental. You should not expect this to work, but I can map renders and to data and say something like, have a method that renders children. And in the future, we can have a reactive framework where we can actually have one source of truth for elements in the page. So when you click on something, you're changing the element itself and it changes elsewhere, right? And things like this. So let's go back to the presentation. I'm also running short on time. I probably will eat 5 minutes of questions. We'll see. Thank you. So I want to talk about the demo of all demos. This presentation is written in PyScript. I was flying here. I was thinking, how can I do a cool thing for the conference? Why not try to write a slideshow framework in PyScript? And it actually was easier than expected. And during the flight, I did most of the work. It's a long flight from Texas. So, but it's in a lot of ways broken as well. But if you saw during the demo, all those REPLs were actually live demos of PyScript in the presentation itself. If we have time, actually, I will show real quick. It's just worth it. So how does this look like? It's a page this long, and I just import my JavaScript, CSS, etc. as usual. I say I'm using Python locally, and I'm using Pyodide locally. So you should not go over the internet. I'm installing those dependencies using pyenv, the pyenv tag. PyScript has an extension framework within it. It's experimental. It probably will break soon. We will change interface, but it allows you to write Python files to extend the framework itself and register new tags. So I'm saying here, use this slides.py file and register a new tag, HTML tag called PySlideshow using the class slideshow as a template. And you can see I'm using that new tag here and say, create this element on the page with this ID and use the source of the slides from slides.slides, not creative as an extension file name. How it looks like, it's just a text file, and I'm separating each slides with this. This is really like 2-second design thinking. What's easier? But anyway, and I can create slides using HTML elements. I actually also created a new tag called that allows you to use Markdown. So you can use Markdown as well, and this is going to translate into HTML directly on the page for you. As you can see, you can use both native HTML file components like divs, but also PyScript things like PyMD, or I'm using REPL elsewhere, etc., etc., etc. So fairly easy to do, broken in a lot of ways. You can also see how could this keynote have gone wrong? Many ways it can fail. Anyway, there are many problems and many considerations to be said about PyScript. There's not a lot and not great documentation. It's not mature. It's not going to be mature for a long time. The languages interoperability are kind of complicated. We are relying on the amazing work from the Pyodide folks, but it needs some work as well. And we need to think about the PyScript side of things, how we want to give an easy API for users, how the debugging experience and things like this. Pycharm just announced 2 days ago there's first support for PyScript on Pycharm. That is very encouraging that we can make the experience better, but it's just the start. GPU support is flaky, or I think there are many ways we can improve things. JIT, can we ever support it? How? Blah, blah, blah. Loading time is a real problem. If you have dependencies and you have large dependencies, it will take time to load. There are ways you can actually bundle things and make it faster for if you are sharing your application. That came from the community. Michael Kennedy from the Talk Python series I was playing with it, found out I could actually build progressive web applications with it and posted. I was mind-blowing. And that's the cool thing about the community. If you throw things out there, people will try and will use it. And you just need to be inclusive and be able to risk things. Lots of things. In the browser, things just look differently. I/O is different. Threading is different. Multiprocessing is different. If you use Python there, things will behave differently. It's not a bug. It's not broken. The files, I haven't covered it yet, or I was going to, but anyway. We are assuming the browser as a VM. We're using the browser as a VM. It's secure. It's ubiquitous. You can run it on native apps, native platform, or Windows or Mac, but also on mobile, etc. It has a lot of thought behind it around security, etc. But things are just different. You can have access to the file system. Networking is different, etc., etc. And hopefully in the future, we want to think how would support for other languages look like. Can we support? I will not say Web3 because the crypto kids ruined the term, but peer-to-peer, right? Apps talking about apps talking with each other directly, peer-to-peer. How could it look like in the future? Transferring your Python applications from the browser to a server side in runtime if you need more computational power, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of that is behind the vision for PyScript. But the real vision for PyScript is that we want to use that as a tool and to encourage the community about thinking bigger. How can we bring programming to the 99%? How can we bring programming to the people that are not technical? They don't care about the language, but they care about data. They care about finding out things. They're curious. Especially, around kids, around people learning in their experience. You know, it's really about democratization and literacy. I will not talk about politics. I will not talk about governments, but a lot of countries, a lot of places don't really invest in education, don't really invest in their own citizens. How can we change the world? And why do we do things? You know, I think a lot of people in the Python open source community, they do things for free because they want to see a better world. And this is just a little drop there too. If we could onboard just 5% of the kids out there that are not doing anything because they cannot, because it's complicated to install Python on your computer, because it's complicated to share your application and reproduce your same environment elsewhere. We're slowly changing the world. And if this is will spark ideas, we're going towards that, that goal. We want to make the programming fun. It's really cool to hack things and see things happening right away instead of on a CLI, on a command line. It could be Minecraft bicycles for the mind. You know, the same way you can build building blocks in Minecraft, you could build extensions in PyScript and share with others and create new tags. And I'm pretty sure people will be way more creative than I am with this. So I really want to close with shout outs, because this project, it will not be possible if it wasn't for the work of a lot of people. Peter Wang at first, for thinking about this and co-creating it. Endless days and nights thinking about design, how can we make it better, etc., etc. But a lot of the people from the Anaconda team supporting it, create examples, creating material for publishing, etc., etc. Really big special thank you to the Pyodide maintainers. Wonderful people who really helped us in many things, and we approached them early on to say we want to use Pyodide and PyScript, and they supported us in many ways. So you should also check that project and support it as well. Thanks to Michael and Christian and a lot of other people on the Python community for the value of feedback and doing their work. I could go on for ages, with script and community, the WebAssembly community, all of them. The thing is that we are sitting on shoulders of giants. This technology has been there for some time, and thanks to the work of a lot of people that are spending their time. And that's it. Thank you for listening, and I hope it has inspired you. Actually, let me ask one quick question first. Who here contributed to PyScript somehow? You already have shirts. Okay. So I'll give a shirt to everyone that asked questions. Go.
Okay. So there are many questions. The first question I would go for is the one about the first part of your slides, and it's about community. And the show asking, wider adoption comes with drawbacks, such as more difficult community engagement. How do you deal with that?
Great question. PyScript is a great example. We really rushed the project, and we really said we have a unique opportunity to throw this idea out there in the wild in front of people, but we don't have documentation. We don't have time to actually really write tests properly, to have codes that be stable, etc., etc. And I was driving most of the development, and I kept talking about not being prepared and worrying, and the overall feeling was like, if you throw things out there, people will grab it and will eventually, the positive will overcome the negative, and it's true. I'm really the negative side of it is people want to contribute. We had people translating the docs from English to Japanese or to Korean, and I'm like, they're sitting crying, like, don't do that, like, because we're going to have to change the documents in a week. And all that great work is going to be thrown away, right? Like, and you feel bad for their time and everything. But I think the positive overcome. So if you are inclusive, if you are communicative, and you say, you know, have patience, I love your energy, this is how you can contribute today, and try to talk with people, I think that will make the experience better. Like transparency, inclusiveness, communications. Communication is a great start to deal with that problem.
That's wonderful. And I think a follow-up from Shoro as well was been, why, so you said, sorry?
No, I think that's there.
You said, with PyScript, you said you challenged the status quo. What has been the response from the Python Matusa, as in, you know, old engager with the language, and how do you answer to that kind of criticism?
So I'll be honest, I don't think I had any negative feedback from the Python community. Like, we showed that to Guido and a few core devs before, and I was really, really worried. But the feedback was very positive, and was, you know, we're doing a change, we're doing something new, you know, which is good. And I hope it's the project for the future. But if it sparked ideas and it sparked, you know, a movement in the Python community, that's also good. So we had feedback from the web community and things like this, which is way bigger than Python, etc. And most of the criticism is this is not the right way to do stuff. Like, you shouldn't create PyScript tags. You should just use script and use the attributes to define the language and things like this. But I disagree with that. I think requiring the minimal amount of typing and having semantic, meaningful tags that will allow non-developers to onboard easier is very important. So, yeah, that's my answer.
Brilliant. And I think, talking about Matusa, there's one Marco in the audience asking, there's lots of upvotes, saying, so Python HTML pages, also known as PHP, why don't you use that acronym instead of PyScript?
Well, I'm glad people didn't bring that up earlier. Let's leave PHP where it is. Also, you can't. You can only create new tags with dash. So, you know, you can't.
In fact, there's another question asking you, why is it PyScript tag instead of a normal script tag with type text/Python? So,
well, the technical reason is you could not create other tags without the tag. I think I answered the real reason. I'm grateful it's not my phone. The real reason is because of what I said before, accessibility and make it easier for non-developers to onboard to the language.
That's great. Very quickly, so there's someone asking what's the project roadmap, and maybe you can tell which is the next thing.
Right. Great question. The next thing is really to put the vision out there, work on documentation, and basically allow people to see a little more in what we have in our brains, and help allow people to help better. We're really trying to also have a place where people can contribute to examples and things like that without really having to push the examples to the main core repo. That makes it harder. And I think that those are the two immediate things. There are a ton of technical things that we're gonna pursue, but it would take a long time. Happy to talk about that after the talk.
So I'm going to go with just another very quick couple of questions, so we'll be really running out of time. But there's lots of questions asking you, what can you actually do? And I think this bringing up the vision in the community is probably the next thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in fact, someone asking, PyScript, so it was wondering whether PyScript website is built using PyScript or something like, whether is it possibly, does it work with Angular, or if you see PyScript being the next PHP/Scratch as an educational tool?
Not PHP. Like Scratch or educational tool, yes, I'd love to. You can actually have a lot of things in the same page and interact with it and learn Python. PyScript.net is not built using PyScript because it's static, but that's one of the next things too. We want to put a REPL where people can play with it.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time, but Fabio will stay with us a little bit longer, so feel free to catch up with him. Thank you so very much, Fabio, for the talk.
Thank you.